Welcome, everybody, to Broadcast Team Alpha, where we bring you cutting edge conversations while exploring the quantum possibilities. And tonight is no different. We're going to have a really great conversation on a really interesting topic. But first, I want to thank you, as always. I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for honoring us with your presence or being here on the replay. Thank you for telling your friends or your family, if you can tell them, about this kind of show and about us. And thank you for your super chats. We got a super chat last week, and I didn't get to see it on my cell phone, but thank you. Thank you so much. We love when you do that. And what do you guys think about the moon? I mean, when I was a little girl, I would look at the moon, right? And then there was all these stories about the man in the moon. So once people started talking about the man in the moon, I guess I could see like a face on the moon. But there were times in my travels when I would be in different parts of the country where it looked like somebody was hanging a paper moon in the sky. It just looked strange. But I have to tell you, Augie was suspicious of the moon way before I was. But if you go to Broadcast Team Alpha on YouTube and look for a documentary-ish, called The Moon Pictures, you'll see where a lot of my questions began to come from, and certainly where Augie's have come from. So I don't want to take up any more time. Augie, will you tell us about our wonderful guest?
Oh, yes, this is going to be so much fun. We have Jay Weidner with us. He is a legend in his own time, and he has been researching what's outside of the box probably just all the way back to about a month and a half before the beginning of time. So, almost as long as me. But he is well known in the speaking circuit and the radio and TV circuit. And he is a frequent guest on radio, TV documentaries. He creates documentaries and on the big shows like, Coast to Coast and things like that. And he's also an author. Go put his name in at Amazon and you will see some of that. And I tell you, you don't want to hear me talking. We want to hear from Jay. So welcome to the show, Jay.
Welcome, Jay. Yeah.
Hey, well, thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Really good.
You've been doing so much and created so much out there. I don't even know where to start, but we did mention the moon earlier, and maybe how did we get to that? Maybe you know how to start on that one. Maybe we can make sense from where we are through the moon and maybe even beyond that to a category 1 or 2 civilization and into that.
Yeah, so basically we got to after World War II. Oh dear, a mind blow here. Okay, so it was the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of the Navy. He died at Bethesda, Maryland. He and Kennedy, JFK, in 1945 visited Germany, and they saw a lot of the stuff that was being worked on there. And so they came back, and they kind of both wanted the stuff released because it was free energy and zero-G vehicles and things. But M12, the group MJ12, they did not want anything released. So Kennedy, after he became president, devised a plan that he thought would get the secret technologies released, and that was by asking for the NASA to go to the moon by the end of the decade, knowing full well that Wernher von Braun had already told Kennedy you would need a rocket the size of the Empire State Building, and we couldn't do that. So he thought for sure that they would release some of their technology because that would be the only way they could get to the moon. Well, they had other thoughts and decided that what they would do was they would go to the moon, but they wouldn't show us how they got there, and that they would hire the best filmmaker they could find to fake the moon landings as if we went up there in a standard rocketry. So they went out and did a search, and they hired a young, very technically apt film director who just finished Dr. Strangelove with incredible effects in it. And he decided to use a science fiction film, 2001: Space Odyssey, as a cover for the research and development of this project, of this faking the moon landings. We now know that he faked the moon landings at the Covington blimp storage hangar in Covington, about 45 minutes from his house in London. We know that now because there are witnesses who saw Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong at the blimp with a full layout of the moon in the blimp hangar. And so, and then Stanley, of course, confessed to all of this in his movie, The Shining, which is really well put out in the movie Room 237. And so, so the question then becomes, so why did they do it? What are they hiding? And what they're hiding is they don't want you to see their technology. Yes, that's true. But they also don't want you to see what they knew was already up there on the moon, because they'd gone and done the lunar orbiter missions in 1966 and 67, which was a very clever camera that took pictures of the surface of the moon and sent them pictures back to Earth. And, there were constructs and structures everywhere. There were ships that were gliding past the lunar orbiter as it was flying by. So we knew by 67 that there was things up there, and whether we went up there and met these aliens or whatever they are or not, I can't tell you. I think we probably did. I've been told we have. I've been told that we have a base up on the moon. I've been told we have a base on Mars. I've been told we have a base on one of the moons of Jupiter. So I don't know. These are high-ranking people that have told me these things, and I tend to believe them because over and over it gets proven to me. And so what I've done is, through all these years of research and going through quite a bit of a number of things, I've now concluded that the Kardashev levels of civilization, and those would be civilization one, which would be the species who has the technological domination of a planet. And then there would be type 2 civilization, where a species has technological domination of a solar system. And then there's a type 3 civilization, where a species has the technological domination of an entire galaxy. We are closing in on becoming a type 1 civilization. We're not there yet, but our masters are pushing us there very, very quickly. And I have seen literally mountains of evidence that there's a type 2 civilization occupying and in control of our entire solar system, from Venus, Mercury, to Earth and the moon, to Mars, to Jupiter, and beyond. And I've seen evidence of this. I know that they're there. And I think that they may even be getting ready to make themselves known to us. I've been told by somebody high up in German intelligence who has actually met, I guess I'll just call them the ETs, who's actually met one of these ETs. And this guy's, hardened 40 years in the service kind of guy. And he told me that, even though he could see this thing and be okay up here in his mind, his gut reaction was wrenching. He said he could not control his gut reaction. And he was a little bit ashamed of himself that he couldn't do that, because he thought he was a tougher guy than that. And he's saying that one of the things that they're doing with the, is that it has a thing in it to calm us down. Okay. And that's just one of the things that's in it. And he said it's to calm us down for when they do this. And it's going to happen soon. It could happen before the end of this year even.
Yeah.
And they really want us. But right now we're in one shock after another. Okay. So it's controlled demolition of the old world and the creation of this type 1 civilization, which they need 5G and AI and all the things that are happening. They need to be in control of the medical, everything in the medical world. That's why you're seeing pretty much private corporations telling everybody what to do. It's jaw-dropping. It wasn't actually really happening, but it is really happening. And you can also see that there's one, I don't think, the one thing I say nowadays, the big difference between now and 10 years ago is I don't have to tell people that there's a cabal. All right. Everybody just accepts it. We can see there's a conductor. We may not be able to see the conductor, but somewhere out there is a conductor, one single conductor, and he's conducting the whole orchestra. And there's a line of where it's going and where it's headed.
That brings me to a question. Who's the conductor?
Well, I mean, the ancient Gnostics said that there was that it was a thing they called the Demiurge. And the Demiurge is a being who wants us to think that it's God, but it isn't. And it's an alien entity that came here thousands of years ago, and it has forces that work for it called archons.
Yeah.
And archons are spiritual parasites that get inside you and turn you into something not what you originally were. And so I believe that the reason that I believe that all of what I just said is true is because historically the Gnostics who taught this have been wiped out of history. I mean, it's been a systemic wipeout. Every time that they would form, some more army or something would come in and kill them all. And leading up to the slaughter of the Cathars in southern France in the 1200s. They were Gnostics. And what the Gnostics believed, which is kind of interesting, is that their form of Christianity wasn't that Jesus came here to die for our sins. Their form of Christianity was that Jesus came here to tell us about the Demiurge, that he was not to be followed, that you're to follow the God of love, which is not the Demiurge. And all you have to do is look at the Old Testament and what this guy Yahweh, who is the Demiurge, is doing. And it's not very nice. I mean, it's just slaughter after slaughter after slaughter. And I think Jesus was coming to say, no, we can't do that anymore. We have to find a new way. And, so he forgave the people that tortured him as an example of how you can fight the archons with love. That's the only thing that can stop the archons is love. And they hate love. They just hate it. And they go in and they try to destroy it. That's what they're doing with our society right now. We're being overrun by an entity that wants us to be unhappy, an entity that wants us not to love and hug each other and be with each other. And this is exactly how the Gnostics described the Demiurge, and that he would come at the end of time on his final takeover, and he would bring out all the evil essence that he had been sowing for thousands of years, and it would all come out at once, all at the same time. And I really honestly believe we're in that time right now. And that is, we're getting hit left and right. I mean, if you're in a fight, if you're like, a 5'4" guy in a fight with Mike Tyson, he's just getting hit left, you're getting hit right. We're just, there's no recovering from it. And to the point where absurdities are beginning to take place. Yeah. So, that's my point of view of the world right now.
Yeah. So that actually kind of go along with what I've been saying for a while. I think the ultimate control on this earth is not the Bilderberger group. It's not the Club of Rome. It's not the 500. It is off the planet. It is, that is what's giving the orders to the subgroups here to do what they do.
That's right. And we're a farming planet for this type 2 civilization. They
Yeah.
come here. How many stories have we heard of UFOs taking water out of lakes? Right, thousands of stories. And I believe that probably half or more than half of the food we grow is for them, not for us. It's for them. And we can go back and look in mythology and see that there's this human interaction with gods, and the gods are always demanding stuff, whether it be, wheat and meat from Cain and Abel, to Ramayana asking for sacrifices, to, I mean, over and over, wherever you look, you see this. And, Akhenaten is walking down the Nile one day. He's just been made the pharaoh, and he hears a noise above him. He looks up. There's a round ship shining in the sun, and the ship says, "You will destroy the old religion, and you will create a new religion, and you will build a temple, a city called Heliopolis." And so the whole thing is, Akhenaten starts this huge religion, the one God religion. He kills all the people that were of the religion before him, and it all came from a UFO.
Yeah.
And the same thing. No, I'm not going to get into that religion, but that's too dicey. But you can just see that there's this influence, off-planet, otherworldly influence, and it's to more or less keep us from finding out that actually all of our work is being done for this type 2 civilization, which refuses to show its face to us. And the only way that they will show their face to us is if we become a type 1 civilization, which we are not yet, but we are getting really close. I mean, we're 95%. We are almost there. And when the AI and the 5G gets put in, then we're going to be, and whatever they're doing with, then we're going to be, in the I don't know, like a Borg, I think, or something. And I think that's their plan. I think we're going to lose our. Rudolf Steiner said that they would create I think he said it like 1910. He said they would create a virus. There would be a virus that they would create that would remove our ability to feel spirit. And I have to say, that could be what's happening. An RN I know who delivers those things, she told me that they seem to have almost an instantaneous Alzheimer's about it. Like they have trouble making decisions, and they can't tell the difference between a pen and a pencil. And, she's just kind of like a fog suddenly appears around him.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I don't know what's happening. If I didn't know better, I'd say that.
When you mentioned that type 1 civilization, we would have been, had we listened to Nikola Tesla from about 120 years ago, or if the people at the Skunk Works have released many of that technology that they have already created, we would have been a solid.
That's right.
Type 1 civilization right now.
That's why the disclosure movement's so important, because
redefine what type 1 is again, please? Sorry.
Type 1 is when a species has technological domination over their entire planet.
Thank you.
So they have satellites watching everything, and they know how many elephants there are, how many lions there are. They know that you turned your thermostat up to 72, and you've been under orders that you cannot turn it up to 70. You just lost 15 points on your social order, your credit system. And if you have more than 2 glasses of wine, you're going to lose 100 points on your credit system. If you eat more than 1,800 calories a day, you're going to, this is where we're headed. And, this is the technological domination of the planet. And all you have to do is read, what's his name? The Bond villain, Carl Schwab, his books to find out this is where they're headed. They're not nonchalant about it. They're just telling you straight up, this is where we're going. And, you don't like it. Oh, well, that's really too bad. And I live up near the Rockies, and I can tell you there's a lot of people that are going to head up into the mountains.
It sounded pretty ridiculous, actually, but this is what they're doing already in China.
Oh, yeah. China's the leading edge of this thing. and they've got their own problems. So I'm not really. China's big problem right now is demographics because of the one-child policy. They have a population of mostly males that are in their early 30s to mid 30s, and there's no women for them. And pretty soon they're going to be out of fighting age. In just like 4 or 5 years, they're going to be out of fighting age. So if China's going to do something militarily, they have to do it now, because they're not going to have the forces necessary to be able. That's what scares me about the world right now, is that China, that's why China is doing what they're doing. They know that they have a demographic time bomb. Dig this. In 5 years, the average age of a Chinese person will be, of a young person will be 40s, or late 30s, early 40s. But 70% of the population is going to be over 65 in 5 years. Think about that. And so China has to think about that, because they can't feed that many people. And so we're heading towards something that's going to be jaw-dropping. As I tell people, if you can survive until 2026, then you will be living in a type 1 civilization. Whether you want to be living in it or not, you will be in it. And I don't think if there's going to be mass deaths. I think a lot of people will die just because they don't want to go from this civilization to that civilization. And so they just give up. A lot of people are just giving up. I totally understand it. But the ones that make it through are going to be chipped and observed and probably live 200 years.
Let me bring it back to the moon landing, or the alleged moon landing in 1969, where Kubrick, I've seen the video where he is on camera and admitting that I did something really bad. I faked the moon landing.
I think that's fake footage.
Really?
Yeah, it's an actor. I know what Stanley looked like. I know every mole on his face, and it's not him. His impression of the voice is even better than the way he looks, but it's not him. So no, Kubrick confessed in the movie The Shining. In the movie The Shining, every time he deviates from the Stephen King plot, he's confessing to doing the moon landing. Think about it. The main part of the plot of The Shining is that Jack Nicholson is writing a book, and he doesn't want Wendy to come into the room where he's writing his book, right? And this is not in the book, in the Stephen King book. This is all comes from Stanley Kubrick. So Shelley Duvall, breaks into his office one night because she wants to see what the manuscript is, and she looks down, and it's the one sentence over and over: all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, right? And so the whole book is just nothing but one sentence over and over, right? And then Jack comes from behind the wall and he says, "How do you like my book?" And then Wendy says, "We got to leave. We got to get out of here." And then Jack says, "Do you have any idea what a contract is? Do you have any idea what my employers would do to me if I said, no to them?" And so she's discovered that he's working on a secret work of art that is just the repetition of this one line. And as I show in my movie, Kubrick's Odyssey, if you actually look at the font that's on the page, the all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. The L's look just like the letter 1. So you can read it, A11, work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. And I contend that Kubrick's code word for the faking of the moon landings was the A11 project, or the Apollo 11 project. And all through Shining are 11s everywhere.
Wow.
All through the movie, there's 11s. And then, of course, the famous scene where Danny stands up and he's got the Apollo 11 rocket on his sweater taking off, right? And that's actually the clear of it. And so, it looks like Kubrick didn't want his wife to find out what he was doing, because he was probably told that, "You tell anybody, we're going to kill him," right? And that was probably his biggest fear, was getting caught. And, he went to all the extent of making 2001 to hide it. If you look, 2001 is concurrently going on exactly with Apollo. Apollo starts in 64. 2001 starts in 64. 2001 it ends in 68 and is released. And Apollo's first mission is 1 year later in 69. And you can see, and what 2001 did was it prepped us for what the Apollo moon landings would look like. So the moon stuff in 2001 is all done with front screen projection, which is how he did the moon landings. So and the astronauts when they're in zero G, they're all walking in real slow motion. So he's got you in the idea by the time you got done watching 2001 that when you're in low grav, you're kind of walking around in water almost, right? Like this. And that's how so he filmed the astronauts because he couldn't figure out how to solve the zero G or the quarter G problem on the moon. So he just filmed everything in 1.5 times slower. So if you speed it up, it looks just like regular guys walking. But if you slow it down 1.5 times, then all of a sudden the astronauts are kind of, when in fact, if you're in a lower gravity situation, there would be less resistance to anything. You would have much more freedom of movement. You wouldn't be walking around like you're in maple syrup. You'd be walking around like you're at the top of Mount Everest. There'd be no atmosphere almost at all. Mm-hmm. So it's the whole thing is so patently obvious when you look at it with rear vision. And I think Stanley would be, if he was alive, he would be surprised that the secrets got uncovered as quickly as they did. I think it would take 20 years or something for someone to finally realize that all this had been buried in his films. And so I think he would be a little surprised. I know his wife, Christiana, was surprised at my revelations, and her assistant wrote me and told me that she was surprised.
And Jay, in about 2 minutes here, we're coming up on a break where we're going to do a little commercial. Before that, tell people also where they can get a hold of you and where they can see your books and maybe some of the videos and stuff, the documentaries that you have out there, because you're talking about some interesting stuff and people really need to know where they can find it.
Well, all of my documentaries are on the Gaia network that I've made over the years: Secrets of Alchemy and Infinity, The Ultimate Trip, and Kubrick's Odyssey, Kubrick's Odyssey 2. And then I have my own show on YouTube, Reality Check, which has a lot of interesting videos. I just did one, Secrets of Antarctica, where we visited with a guy who spent a year at the South Pole. Also, my books are on Amazon, like you said, and jweidner.com is my website where I have a lot of free writing, articles, that kind of stuff.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
Yeah, and then, of course, to Amazon, I was there and I could see a couple of the books there at least two. Is there more?
Mysteries of the Great Cross of Hyundai is the one that you can still buy for at least a decent price, which is really the first book elongated. And it's a tough read. I'm not going to say it isn't. It's a tough read. It's very esoteric and deep, very deep book. So, but a lot of great people have praised it. Jocelyn Godwin, the great scholar at Cornell University, called it one of the greatest books, written in the 21st century. Got some really good praise for it.
Okay, well, we are at the bottom of the hour, so let's see if our producer run the video.
So, Augie, wait, before we go, some people were asking what you were drinking in your broadcast team Alpha mug, and I told them that you're always drinking coffee.
Oh.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Life is good.
Right. Mac, are we good to
and
go?
No, for you Norwegians out there, this is not carved with moonshine in it. It's not. Okay, Max, just let's run the video.
I'll be back.
Okay.
I knew that there was a need because my father had a need. And if my father had a need, then how many other people have a need?
The key to Tyler's coffee is the roasting process. Because Mother Nature makes the coffee bean. We can only work with the processing.
We knew we wanted to go USDA certified organic. We wanted to be the purest and cleanest coffee in the world. We had to source stuff from Africa, we had to source stuff from Brazil, we had to source stuff from Chile, and we put it through our proprietary Z-roasting processor. So what that really truly means to you is that the coffee doesn't have inflammatory properties in it. I'm dedicated to serving 50 million Americans that suffer from stomach-related modalities, and also the millions of other people that just deserve a great tasting cup of coffee that's healthy and safe.
Okay, well, we are back, and by the way, it's coffee, and this is the only acid-free coffee anywhere, and that is good for our health.
All right, before we go on, I just want to do a shout out to the chat room. Chat room is busy. Wow. Let's see who we have here. Oh my goodness. We have Dolores Green. Hi, Dolores. Nancy Volker's here, our moderator. Hi, Nance. Shady D, always with us. Thanks, Shady. Margaret Parker. Hi, Marg. Constance is here. Oh, hi, Constance. Aw. Nancy and Dolores, and bear with me, guys. I'm going down. Roots Lion is here. Hello. I don't know you, but I'm so happy you're here with us. Joy is here. And Star Wolf is here. Hi, guys. It's so good to see you. Everybody's really having a great conversation. Someone, anybody is who asked about what you're drinking, Og. And OBZRV is here. Really cool. All right, I won't delay the conversation anymore. I just want to thank everybody for being here. Hi, Sherry. Oh, Sherry's here. Hi. Okay, let's talk about the moon.
Yeah. What
Stuff.
in the world do you think it is up there?
It's a part of this Type 2 civilization. It's probably well, what I think that the civilization does is I think that they capture an asteroid, and then they heat it up, and then like glass blowing, they stick a tube into the center, and they pump a gas in, and they blow the asteroid up into just like glass blowing, right? I think that's how they construct their ships and things, and I think that is what the moon is. I think it's a rather large asteroid that they heated up and made it into a hollow ship, and then they placed it in orbit, and as their farm. So it's their barn. It's where they live. They go down there and get their food and humans and animals and genetics and water and everything. This is what we are. I don't know if they came from here and went out into space, and that's what's going on, or if they migrated here from somewhere else, and we're some kind of genetic creation like the cuneiform tablets say we are. And but they do definitely, the tablets say that we were made as slaves to do gold mining and farming.
When it really come down to it, though, the moon cannot be from here, because when they got the moon rocks, they found that the moon was, I believe, about 400 million years older than Earth. So it wasn't even formed in the same cloud of dust as this solar system was.
That's right. It's a completely foreign object. And what it does is, it's sort of a terraforming thing. So what they wanted to do was create a vibrant atmosphere for their farming planet. And one thing you would need is tidal action, right? Lots of tidal waves, rising oceans and things. And the moon does that. So it was part of a terraforming plan, really, to make the Earth into a better farm. over and over, we can see that we're a farming planet. And here's the thing. We are now at the stage where 100 years ago, it took 1,000 farmers to grow a certain amount of food. Today, it only takes 5 to grow that same amount.
Yeah.
So they don't need as much labor anymore as they used to. It's very important to understand current events. Okay, there's a labor, and that's why the supply chains are being knocked apart right now. They don't need the supply chains anymore. They've got everything in place for their type 1 civilization, and they don't want to have a whole bunch of people on their type 1 civilization. Just don't. They don't want to have a lot of people. They want to have a manageable amount of highly skilled, intelligent, high-tech workers. That's what they want. The robots can do everything else. So the robots can grow the food, the robots can process the food, the robots can load the food on the trucks, the robots can drive the trucks, the robots can do everything. And that's the world that they're planning. Klaus Schwab's world is exactly that. And so, the people in the city will become the type 1s first, and then it'll slowly work its way out into the countryside. It's going to be a bit harder for them to pull that off out in the country. Because everybody's just so far from each other. Probably there'll be some tricks to try to get people to move from the country into the city. I would look for that soon. Probably collapsing hospitals in the country will be one of the ways that they get everybody into the city, because you can't, get yourself fixed when you're hurt, and then you're in kind of a precarious situation. So, it's completely obvious to me what road we're on, where we're going, how we're getting there. I'm a very well-read individual, so I don't expect everyone to know as much as me, because, they don't spend 16 hours a day just reading everything in sight like I do. But, is there trepidation heading towards this? Yeah, there is. Do they really know what they're doing? So far, the experts haven't really given me a lot of confidence in what's happening here. So I don't know. Everywhere I look, I see incompetence. Yeah. And I don't know if that's real, if it's theater. But, there's lots of other things at play right now. We have cosmic rays pouring in as our electromagnetic field collapses. That hasn't happened in 400 years. We don't know what effect that has on us physiologically and psychologically. We know that the last time this happened 400 years ago, that a lot of villages in Europe went completely crazy. We don't still to this day know what happened in these villages, but literally they would kill each other until everyone was dead. So does the cosmic rays have something to do with suddenly everybody getting a little crazy and wacky? I think it does. And so the moon is also a kind of communication device. And I'm sort of in with David Icke in that I think that Saturn and the moon are somehow harmonically linked, and that they're control systems. When they have a full moon, the cops have to add 20% more to the force because there's going to be so much more crime and craziness on a full moon. Well, why is that? It's just reflecting light from the sun. Why would that be? And I would say that there's some kind of controlling force there that literally makes us turn into lunatics, and that they can turn that force on at any time they want. I myself, when it's a full moon, I can't sleep. I can't sleep. Yeah. I go to bed, I'll sleep for about an hour and a half, and then it's just tossing and turning all night long for 3 straight nights a month. I know I'm going to do it. And, actually I'm starting to regret that it's coming, because I'm so dog tired after those 3 nights of not getting any sleep. Right. But I can feel it. I can feel it in my, sizzling in my head. And, all the myths of vampires and werewolves and all turning into these things during a full moon. So, it's a controlling force. And here's the thing, it may not even have been here that long, because I believe it's a tribe in Bolivia, which we know goes back at least 10,000 BC, this tribe, they say they saw the moon being tugged into orbit. One of their myths is they saw the moon being tugged into orbit. So it may be that there's a lot of events that happened 12,000 years ago on this planet, which are really difficult to explain. Right near me is the Great Sand Dunes National Park. And these are huge sand dunes, and they drilled down through the sand dunes, and they discovered that there was a forest that carbon dated at 12,000 years ago. So these sand dunes were only been here, created for 12,000 years. And again, you look at hieroglyphs in American Southwest and their descriptions of plasma storms and how long did a hieroglyph last on the wall of a canyon wall? It can't last more than 10 or 12,000 years, I wouldn't think, with erosion and everything. So there's something happened 12,000 years ago, and I believe it was when this type 2 civilization entered in here.
When you're saying that moon came into orbit around 12,000 years ago, that would very much coincide with the time when Noah had his problems.
Yeah, exactly. So that would cause the Great Flood. The moon coming in would create such tidal stress that just the act of bringing it in would cause these huge floods to erupt everywhere. Yeah. And if you couple that with a solar flare, which I believe is what ended the Younger Dryas, you've got a recipe for immense weather changes and ice melting, glaciers melting suddenly. We know that the Puget Sound was a 13,000 foot high sheet of ice. And then for some reason, 12,000 or 11,500 years ago, just melted and left the Puget Sound behind. And it's like, wait a minute, what is going on? Super dramatic changes are happening in 12,000 years. And if you look, they happen in 6,000 year incremental cycles, in which we're now reaching that end of the second 6,000 year cycle. So 6,000 years ago is when we entered into civilization, supposedly. Writing was developed, and horseback and agriculture was really advanced, and hydrology was invented, and cities were invented, and slavery was invented, and all these things all happened at 6,000 years ago. And 6,000 years before that was a big dramatic changes. And now here we are 6,000 years later, and we are in the middle of the most dramatic changes, both politically, but physically, spiritually, medically, everything. Yeah. This is the turn that we're making into this type 1 civilization that, our technocratic masters are forcing us into.
Let me run something by you real quick about the moon, or how it got there. In the Germany, they have, there's papers showing this, that they had their first UFO crash in 1928 in Bavaria.
Right.
And from there on, they started learning a bunch of stuff. And between that, which they were not able to back engineer at that time, but that and Maria Ortiz, which has mental images of the design of a flying disc that she put on paper, and she was an uneducated woman, and they all laughed at her until some scientists got to see it, and they got excited because now they said, this makes sense, and they start building it. So from there on, we ended up with the Hyundai 1, the Hyundai 2, and the Hyundai 3, which were anti-gravity vehicles. And the Germans, they went to the moon in 1942, and they found this swastika-looking building in the bottom of the Bancroft crater, I think it is. And they fell in love with the swastika, of course. So that's where they built their base in. What if their technology they created helped create what we have in the Black Projects now? So we actually are kind of a category, or should I say type 1 civilization. It's just that we don't know it.
We are, but we have to have it worldwide. And so that's why, by constricting it, and I understand why they held it secret, they're trying to, it's Sun Tzu and the art of war, right? You keep everything a secret. It's totally understandable. But what's happening is that they're getting pressure from the beings that gave them that technology, that put the images into Maria's head. All right. They're getting pressured that the planet itself, their farm, is getting destroyed. Okay. They're very concerned. If you look at UFO encounters of the third kind, going all the way back to the 50s, the beings that abduct people are always concerned about the health of our planet. They say, you are hurting the planet. You're destroying the planet. Well, if you're aliens, what do you care? You know, you must have some kind of, some kind of, debt in the system here for you to be that concerned that you're abducting people and telling them to start taking care of the planet. And I don't think it's any accident. And not many people have ever pointed this out, but psychedelics, UFOs, and the hippie movement all happened at the same time. Right? All happened really at the end of the 50s, right? And I don't believe that that's an accident. I believe all three of those events were events that were caused by this type 1 civilization, the UFOs, bringing in the technology, the abductions, the psychedelics were designed to throw our consciousness and grow it out so that we could handle this whole thing. By the way, all the guys that started Silicon Valley all will tell you unabashedly that the number one influence for them for making computers was LSD. All of those original guys will tell you that. Yep. It was LSD tripping on acid that gave them the ideas for how to make these computers. Okay, so are the ideas themselves coming from? We know Jack, I forget his name, the physicist, forget his name. He used to receive phone calls. When he lived in the Bronx in the 50s, he'd receive phone calls from a robotic voice, which said it was coming from a satellite, and download high-end to this guy who's now one of the top physicists in the world, right? And he claims that he got all of his ideas from a robot voice that would call him, saying it was from a satellite orbiting the Earth, right? When there weren't even satellites then, by the way. This is before any satellites or anybody knew what a satellite was. And finally, his mom grabbed the phone and heard the voice and told him to never call again, hung up. But we can see these ideas are being fed out by this intelligence. But Terence McKenna used to call the other, right? It's this thing, it's out there, and it's trying to guide us into this other thing. And we're scared and we're afraid of it, and we should be. If you're not afraid, you shouldn't be out there, right? Fear is a great protector. So all hunters are afraid. So that when they're out there, even with their big, huge guns, they're afraid. Believe me, they know something can run right behind them and kill them instantly. So you have to have your head on a swivel. You have to have situational awareness, and so that's where we are. And it's it's breathtakingly frightening and exciting at the same time. And I think we can probably guess where we're going here. I would say that. Trips to the moon are going to become a possibility even in this coming world.
So there's Jay, there's a question in the chat room. Dolores Green asks, the orbiting satellites is how the moon was discovered to not be real. Is that true? No. What happened is that they pinged the moon with seismometers, and it was hollow. That's how we found out it was hollow. And so the moon is hollow. It weighs far less than it should. Again, that's because they took an asteroid and blew it up and all of that. And it's probably occupied by giant computer systems and people or whatever they are, the other, that are working it. And they're watching us and monitoring us, and they're the watch in the Bible, that's exactly what they're doing. They're watching us. And, it's fascinating. I mean, I've seen, 50 videotapes from people with their telescopes with flying objects flying all over the moon, flying above the moon, in the moon.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's the secret's out there. We don't even really need disclosure, except we'd like to see the physical stuff and how it works. But in my mind, I'm already there. I'm already, you know, I'm already in the type one civilization. I'm
Yeah.
already, I'm there. I got it. I'm not worried about it. I don't know if I want to get chipped, but other than that, I'm fine.
I got another question that knowing that the Germans had been to the moon in 1942 and they had interplanetary craft back then, which the Americans got, they got at least 2 Hannibal 2s. We know that. And they have back engineered that, which was pretty simple actually. And then they had these kinds of craft. Do you think that they went to the moon in 1969 in the tin can, or did they fly there in something else and then blame the trip on the tin can to make it look good?
Yeah, they did the latter. They'd gone to the moon. The United States had been to the moon by the late 50s. And we started Project Horizon in the early 60s, in which we shipped, I think, 1,500 Marines to the moon to build a base. And why wouldn't you build a base? Of course you'd build a base there. You'd have to be insane to not build a base. So, all these things. The Mars was in the 60s. They finally got to Mars. And there's a base on Mars, a rather large base, I hear. And and so what happened is that the Germans were the first ones to create the off-planet civilization, the alternative 3 or whatever. And then the United States folded them in Operation Paperclip, but keeping it all secret. That's what Kennedy knew about and was trying to expose, was all the German equipment that they had and how advanced they'd gotten by the end of the 1950s. That's what you have to understand. They had 10 years of these German scientists in the United States being funded by the richest country on earth, and they were coming up with just one thing after another. It was actually breathtaking almost. And I've heard rumors that the Germans themselves were genetically designed to be the best engineers by these same type 1 forces. And that, and so same with the Southeast Asians, that they're actually a genetically created entity that is extremely good with engineering. Right. And that's designed for their type 1 civilization. They're purposely designing those beings so that they can be used when the big shift comes. And if you look at the countries that are accepting the type 1 civilization, they're Germany and Austria and, Sweden, and they're all the Germanic types of countries. And again, you look at German engineering skills and it's off the chart, period. It's off the chart. I mean, I'm German, a German extraction, but my goodness, you see what the Germans are able to accomplish. It's really quite astonishing.
In a very short time.
Very short time. And, they went from, practically a third world country in 1930 to really the top country on earth by 1935. I was like, what? How can they even possibly do that? Right. But they did. And did they have off-planet help? I think so. For sure.
They had some brilliant advice that came from somewhere, because first of all, they created their own money, and that's what really teed off the Rothschilds. And for the second, Hitler put no limitations on his scientists. There were no cover-ups, no nothing. Create whatever you want to help the father.
It was this fantastic freedom of exploration of ideas that was allowed. That was actually astonishing. And so nobody felt like they were going to get thrown in jail for what they were doing for the first time since science started, in the Renaissance. They were always afraid of being thrown into jail because they were like alchemists a little bit, right? They were like weird, and what are you doing, and how can you do that, and just natural jealousy that goes against people who are really smart. I know, I speak from experience. And so so the story of here's let me give you an interesting factoid. David Paulides writes the Missing 411 books. in which he looks into all the missing people across the United States that go missing. And he's a good friend of mine. And I was talking to him one time. I said, of all the stories that you look at, what's the weirdest factoid that sticks out? And he says, the weirdest thing about these missing people, Jay, is how many of them are of German descent. And I'm like, what?
Really?
He said, yeah, he said it must be at least 65% have German sounding names. And he said, a lot of them are scientists and chemists and physicists, and they just vanish off the face of the earth. It's like, what?
Alternative 3, that's the brain drain, isn't it?
Yep.
That's when they take them to Mars, to the bases up there to build up that society.
There's a story that David tells of a University of Washington physicist. And he drives to Olympic National Park in Washington State. He gets out of his car. It's a foggy 55-degree day. He's wearing bright Hawaiian clothes, right, with shorts, completely not dressed right. He walks up to every person in the parking lot and goes, hello, 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 makes himself known to everybody, right? And then he tells her, I'm going on a hike. I'm going on a hike. I'm going on a hike. And then he goes down the path and he's never seen again. And David points out, what is this, the most obvious thing you've ever seen? The guy looks like he's going to Hawaii.
Wow.
He's saying goodbye and making himself very well known, right? So when his disappearance goes, oh yeah, I saw that guy, right? And everybody will, wonder what happened, right? And he's never been found. Right. And you just got to wonder what's really going on there. And since there's thousands a year, are they being
I mentioned something here, alternative 3, and it may not be totally familiar to everybody. That is the brain drain from Earth. When the people that set up the base on Mars, they get scientists and the more educated, higher technological people and their wives and their friends to go to Mars and build up a society, which now I understand there's supposed to be well over 2 million people there.
Yeah, and and then they made a fake documentary in the 70s called Alternative 3 on British television, and which was really, really revealing. And what's interesting about it is then they banned that documentary. You can now see it on YouTube. But the author of the book Alternative 3, who claims that he was told all this by a high-ranking person in the British military, he moved from England to Australia, and all of his writing stuff was on the ship. And when he arrived in Australia and he got his stuff out, somebody had gone into the storage area of the ship and had removed all of his books and his manuscripts, his files, everything had been taken. So, yeah.
Wow.
Well, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to leave you with one final story. Okay, this is a good story.
Yeah.
So in 1994, Richard Hoagland and I were invited to give a 5-minute presentation at the wealthiest, biggest law investment firm in the United States. Apparently, they would do like 10 an hour or something, right, of these presentations. So Hoagland, I had 2.5 minutes, and Hoagland had 2.5 minutes. And what we were presenting was we wanted to make an IMAX film called Return to the Moon, in which we would send a 3D camera up to the moon and orbit and photograph where all the astronauts were and the mountains, the Appian Sea, and all over it, the entire moon, right? And our 5-minute presentation turned into a 3-hour meeting, okay? And they brought in guys that you would know about into this project, big, huge movie producers who were really interested in it. IMAX was interested in putting money into it, right? It was going to cost $30 million to do it. Private launch out in the South Pacific, right? So they're all excited. They hire this guy to do diligence. He's an attorney, flew with Buzz Aldrin, taught Buzz Aldrin how to fly. He flew helicopters in Vietnam, and he's named, I'll call him Max. He was sent in to do diligence. So could we really do what we say that we were going to do, right? All of a sudden, the law firm quits answering our phone calls. So we're getting worried. So this is in Seattle. I'm getting on the ferry to go to Bainbridge Island in Seattle, and I see Max, And I say, hey, and Max lives nearby me, I find out. So I say, hey, Max, what's going on with the lunar project, the moon project? And he takes me aside. He looks really nervous. And he says, well, listen, man, I called the head of NASA and I told them what we were planning on doing. And he said, if you launch anything, a camera or anything to the moon, we will blow your rocket out of the sky. Don't ever call me again. And hung the phone up on him. And, and so I thought, oh, wow, my moon project's over. I thought I was going to be a millionaire, And so about 3 weeks later, I'm at my home on Bainbridge Island. It's a rainy night. It's about 9 o'clock at night. And I see headlights coming down my dark driveway with all my trees. And somebody gets out of their car and they knock on the door. And I don't know what's going on. I'm kind of freaked out. And I unlock the door and I turn on the light and it's Max. And I say, Max, what are you doing? You want to come in, get out of the rain? He goes, no. I go, what's going on, Max? He goes, they know you're writing a book about what's really up on the moon, and they've told me to come here and tell you to stop writing your book. Wow. And he turned around and he got in the car, and I never saw him again. I turned around and I picked up my manuscript that I'd been working on for 3 years, and I threw it onto the fire.
Wow.
That I had going.
Oh, no.
Yep.
How long ago was that?
1994. Yeah.
That's a shame.
7 years ago, yeah. But I say that to you to give you an example of, what the cover up is and why they, because we were doing it to see the stuff, right? We weren't doing it to make an IMAX movie. We didn't care about that. We wanted to see the stuff up there, right?
There is stuff.
There is stuff. A lot of stuff.
There is stuff.
And you know who wants to really see it? Elon Musk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He wants to see that stuff so bad.
Yep.
Yep.
Well, I'm telling you, this has been a phenomenal discussion here, Jay. This has been wonderful.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, we tell them one more time where they can get a hold of you and see your website and your books.
Yeah, so it's jweidner.com. That's just my name. And all my documentaries are up on Gaia.com. And then I have a show called Reality Check, which I interview all sorts of interesting people. And my books are on Amazon, just under my name, type it in. I've only got 2 books. One costs $950. The other one only costs $29.95. So you can buy the other one.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
This
Jay.
was fun. Thank you.